Hey everybody, welcome. Happy Friday. The weekend is finally upon us, and today we're going to be completing our Creating an Epic World series with the fantasy world style. I'm super excited about this. Today we're going to be completing the remaining POIs. We're going to be adding labels, including the title plate. We're going to be adding a frame, filters, and a legend, and so much more. We have a lot to cover today, so it's going to be a bit of a beefy stream, and I'll be sure to make this map clonable once it's finished so that you guys can clone and edit for your own personal use. Hey, Kayfabe, glad that you are here. So let's get cracking here. So we're going to start by finishing the remaining points of interest. And what I've done in the last episode is I put a series of notes with our note tool. You just press the N key and you'll be able to activate the note tool. You can only see the notes when the note tool is activated. So I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in, and I'm going to go ahead and just read each blurb for each of the location and then add what is in the blurb into the map. This is a great way to add a little bit of lore, and then you know what kind of elements to add to your points of interest. And a blurb is a great place to start because you can always elaborate on the blurb from there, right? Your blurb is the bones, and then you just keep adding upon that. So it's a great way to do lore easily instead of having to come up with some 20-page long document kind of covering all the lore. It's always good to start small and then to kind of build up from there. And not every POI, by the way, will have a point of it, or will have structures. It might just be land features, so we'll see. So let's start with that first one. It's called Nautilus City. It's a sprawling city built upon the ocean itself. Nautilus is a marvel of engineering and magic. Its floating districts are connected by coral encrusted bridges, while massive ancient leviathans swim beneath its foundations. It is a hub of trade, exploration, and intrigue, where pirates, nobles, and merchants alike seek their fortune. So it's kind of, a water-like city here, and I think what I'll do is I'm going to use, there is a couple cities here. I think it's under capital. Let's take a look. There's one that kind of has one that kind of in the water. Let's see if I can find it here. I don't think it's in here. I might have to go the catalog, go expand all, because I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a golden one, and it has some piers underneath of it, and so that one might work well. I just can't remember the name of it. It's in here somewhere. We got to scroll down a little bit to try to find it. There it is right here. This is the sunken city. You can see there's a little bit of piers kind of underneath it. Let's zoom in. You can take a good look at it. You can see that it's got some elements that are underwater. And so I think this would play a good role for what the city we're trying to make. I'm going to go ahead and use scale as well. Remember, I always kind of look at existing stamps to go to scale, or you write down the number in which you had the scale at. Because this one is up in kind of the more frozen area, what I think I'll end up doing is desaturating it so it has that whitish color, give it the more white color. And then I think this will kind of do better for over here because it fits with the overall theme. You're kind of in a cold-like area. And so to kind of keep that theme, I'll go ahead and push this and put it right along the ledge here. Remember, it's in the water here. And I'm not going to worry about trying to create a coral bridge because that is probably so zoomed in you wouldn't need to see that, but it's a bit of information for later when I decide to make a city map or a battle map at the gates of the city where the coral bridge is. Those little bits of detail are helpful for later when you build a battle map. And what I might also want to do around here is just maybe add in a couple things to kind of complement it. So I could add in some like jagged icy rocks or anything like that. Hey, first time chatter, glad that you are here, by the way. I think what I'll end up doing is go into like the terrain type areas. There should be some hills maybe. Let's try hills. I don't think that's right. Let me go into, that's fantasy regional. That's not right. We want to go to fantasy battle maps or fantasy world. There we go. Let's see here. There should be some like either icy stones or rocks that I can use. There's also these right here, these kind of orc bone decorations. I kind of like those, but what I want to do is that stamp is kind of running solo over there. And so what would be nice is to kind of give other things to kind of complement it. Like I could have maybe like a ruined section, like right next to it. Desaturate it, bring the brightness up. And I don't want it to distract from the main part. So this might be a little too big. So let's just scroll through and add a smaller one. I think right about there looks good. And this will kind of make it look like it's not just one giant solitary stamp. And then I should probably choose like maybe some random little houses or little settlements off to the side there. And I'll also make them kind of white, saturation, bring the brightness up a little bit. I'm just going to place a couple of them around this ruin right here. And that will kind of complete the overall size of the city there. So we have that sunken part of the city. We've got some part of it on land that could be like ruined and fallen apart. And I think that overall that comes together. I think one other thing we might want to add is maybe add a little fog bank. Let's see here. What we can do is, I think I'm going to use this kind of cloud right here, the one with the bottom bridge that we made several episodes ago. And what I'll do is I'll put a little fog bank along the base of it. So I'll go ahead and just add in cloud. I'll use one of these. Let's use this one right here. It's got a nice kind of curve to the top of it. I'll put it right over here. There's a shadow that's on right now. Let's turn that off. I'm going to place that right along here. I'm going to bring the opacity down. Make sure to bring it up a layer. And then I'm going to have this nice fog bank that kind of rolls into the city. I think that adds more to the lore of it. I think that looks nice. We can take a step back and look at it. I think overall that looks right. Okay, we finished that first POI. Let's go back into the notes. And then we'll choose the next one, this location right here, the Ivory Tower. It's a lone spire of glacial ice and pale stone. The Ivory Tower is home to an enigmatic order of mages who study the flow of time and crystals, or they use crystals to kind of study the flow of time. They rarely intervene in worldly affairs, but they choose to remain neutral. So they're kind of hermits. They don't really come out very much, but there's a tower there, and I think a good place to always put a tower or any kind of fortified position or any kind of settlement is on top of a hill or a mountain, because that height gives you a fortification advantage, right? You can see further away at the top of the structure because it's higher up. You have better range with your weapons, whether it's arrows or catapults or whatever it is. That always gives you a height advantage. So if you're ever curious on where you should put towers, a castle, a fortress, usually some form of elevation works best, whether you're using some cliffs or whether you're using a hill, a mountain, a mesa, whatever it might be. So those things are kind of important. So what we need to do is choose some kind of tower to represent the Ivory Tower. So I'll type in tower, and there should be a bunch here. I can kind of look at each one of them and see which one kind of fits best to it. I kind of like this human tower right here. This is kind of a nice one. And what I might want to do again is I want to make sure that I don't make it too large. So I'll go ahead and just scale it down and kind of use this as a reference. It's okay to have some stamps be bigger because there is this scale inconsistency problem that happens. I've mentioned this in a previous stream, but what it is that some people think that everything has to be perfectly to scale. Even the settlements have to be at the same scale as the terrain. That's not the case. It gets confusing because travel is where people get confused. So what instead is I don't base my scale of the settlements off the same scale as the terrain. The terrain, I'll make everything to a particular scale, and then my points of interest, what I'll do is I'll make them slightly bigger so that they're more visible. The players can see them. They know what they're heading towards. They can get an idea. It creates a sense of curiosity, and it also allows for just more visibility, right? Otherwise, if you wanted to keep something to the same scale as the terrain, you would probably have to use an icon, because a city would be completely outside of view at a scale that's small, right? And so it kind of makes sense to say, all right, I'm going to have my terrain at a separate scale, and I'm going to have my points of interest at a separate scale. And it won't screw up your travel, because when I make a scale, I set it by travel, right? I'll say this distance between these 2 points right here are actually 10 miles, and I won't even use miles or a measurement of distance. I use days of travel, and that makes it easier. So that way you could say from this POI to this POI is 3 days, because when I'm DMing, I've noticed that that is the most important thing about scale when it comes to overworld travel or traveling on the world map. It's all about how many days it takes to get somewhere, because a lot of DMs plan things within those amount of time, like maybe they're going to get ambushed by whatever, and so having those days in between is helpful. So kind of important to remember that. Now that I've scaled up the tower, that was a little bit of a diatribe on scale, so I'm glad you bear with me there. I'm going to go ahead and place the tower just like right here. It doesn't have to be at the very peak. It could be along the edge, right? Just right here. It looks like it's kind of nestled nicely right here. And I kind of like that. I think that looks good. And as always, I kind of like to add a couple more things to it. I don't like to just add a single tower there. Maybe you could add in a couple things like either a ruin, or you could add in some ruined walls or something that kind of create like a courtyard or something. Why don't we do that? Let's use these ruined wall formations right here. And I'll bring the saturation down on them. They're a little green. And what I'll do is I'll create a wall. I always like to add a little bit of details to my POIs. I like to add more than just the point of interest itself. So we add like a broken wall piece that goes right here. And then I can add another one that maybe goes like, let's see here, across like this. Right there. And then let's add another one that goes maybe like this, like a little tower segment. And then let's add another segment that kind of angles this way. I'm going to add all these pieces. And we're going to create like a little kind of like a courtyard. Like this. There we go. And then you have like this kind of courtyard. And what that could be is like, maybe that's the bailey. And it's not for a castle, but it's the bailey of that tower right there. So before you can even get into the tower space, your players will have to somehow go over the wall, scale the wall, attack whatever forces are within that quarantined area, that wall or bailey space, before they can get into the tower. That allows for a much more unique combat when the time comes to when your players arrive at this place. They'll be able to have a more interesting battle. The battle that takes place before get into it, the battle to get inside of the tower, and then as it goes up. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of go about that. So now once I've done that, what I should do is probably connect these locations. I want to make sure that I have the right tool set. And remember, we talked about this in the last episode. Whenever you're placing down roads, you never go in a straight line like this, where it just goes straight like this. And the reason why is because normally there's usually some kind of things that get in the way, terrain, cracks, crevices, ridges, and things like that. So when you place it down, get your curves in there, right? Have some curve like this, maybe have it bend back. And what this does is this creates this illusion that there's this terrain that you can't see, and then just go ahead and connect it right to wherever the entrance of the tower is. And it's kind of hard to see, so what I'll end up doing is maybe bring the size up a little bit so you can see it more. There we go. It's just so small and the same color as the region. So I just bring the scale up and you can kind of see a little better. There we go. Okay, so now that I've connected my road to this next location, I can add the next one. Let's see, which one's up here? This one is the Lost Lands, a frozen wasteland that extends beyond the known world. That's the world where most inhabitants are. The Lost Lands are littered with like ancient ruins. So what we might want to do is take some ruins, these ones right here, and just kind of scatter them about. Just put a couple. And then now we have these nice kind of ruined spaces for your characters to explore. And you can use these ruins for a number of things. Maybe your players have to do a fetch quest out there. Maybe they need to go up there and save a nobleman's daughter or son that's been kidnapped. Or maybe there's an artifact that's there. So throwing in some ruins, and they don't even have to be labeled, right? Sometimes it's nice to have non-labeled points of interest. That way it creates a little bit more curiosity for your players. They go, oh, this location isn't labeled. What is this place, right? So not labeling little locations like this is kind of helpful. And when you do place them, don't make them all equidistant from each other. Look carefully when I do this. You'll notice that the distance between each one of these POIs is almost equidistant from each other. That means they're all the same distance from each other. That looks weird. So instead, what I would do is have one be close, one be farther away, one have medium away, and then have one far, far away. And what you can do is if you want one to be more central, then have this big one be the central one, have some smaller ones close to it, middle, and then farthest away over here. And that way, it doesn't all look like it's equidistant. And what I'll do is I notice that these are all kind of horizontally aligned to each other, so I'll push this down a little bit, and that will kind of break that up. There we go. And so now we have these nice ruins, and I'm not even going to put a road on these. And the reason why is because this is kind of a wasteland where there's a lot of snow and wind, and so much of the road and the path gets swept away. And so to show that to my players that this is kind of a windswept kind of wasteland-like place, I'm not going to add any roads. This will send a very clear message to the players. This is a dangerous place. I think that's it for this location, so we can go ahead and go over to our notes and add in our next couple locations. Let's add in this one, the Frost Sentinels. These are massive ice-encrusted statues standing along the cliffs of the northern coast. No one knows who carved them or why, but they seem to watch over the fjords like silent guardians. On rare occasions, their positions seem to shift with the movement of the glaciers, considering that they are pretty much made of ice themselves, and they're in an area where there's permafrost, and it doesn't really melt. And so we'll zoom in and take a look. You can see the fjords that we created. We have some ice islands kind of floating all along the coast here. And so what we'll want to do is we'll want to create some statues, and there are some statues in Fantasy World. Let's type in statue, and there should be two. One with more isometric and front facing. That's perfect. We can use these. So let's first set a scale. We want these to be imposing, so making them fairly large is a good idea. Hey, both of you first-time chatters, glad that you're here, by the way. I'm going to bring the brightness up. And what I want to do is I can put these in a number of locations. I can place one like on top of a glacier itself. I could place one maybe on top of an ice island itself. I could place one up here on top of this island right here, on top of this arch right here. So there's a lot of different places that you can kind of put these. So I think I might put one like maybe like right here. I think that one looks good. And then I think I can add another one, but I'll flip and rotate so it's facing a different direction. And these are kind of all throughout. So, and I want to rotate them to show that they are shifting. So I can take this one, kind of rotate it this way a little bit. And then I can take this one, the front face one, desaturate, bring the brightness up. And then I can place this somewhere. And I can kind of maybe place it like right here. And then maybe place another one like right here along this edge. And I'll make it maybe some different sizes so they're not all the same size. So I'll bring one down and put one over here. I'll flip it, put one over here. Let's put it on this side, maybe just right here, hanging out along this river right here. Now, they're blurry at first when you look at these, but don't worry. When we go to export at 8K, you'll be able to see these just fine. It's just blurry because we're working at a really small scale. So if it gets confusing, don't worry. These are totally going to be non-blurry when we export at 8K. So we have these kind of frost sentinels, and I'm rotating them a little bit to indicate that there's movement, right? Normally a statue doesn't move, but because these are made of ice and they're part of the glaciers kind of carved into them, I want to show movement. So just tilting them a little bit or rotating them a little, couple degrees left or right, whichever direction, kind of helps to indicate that movement a little bit. Okay, so those frost sentinels are done. Let's go to the next one. Go over to my notes. Let's continue going this way and we'll kind of loop around. So here's our next one, Mosskelm. It's a crumbling fortress city overtaken by frost and creeping moss. It was once the capital of an ancient kingdom, but now it is inhabited only by scavengers and lost souls. So I'll go in here, and what I want to emphasize is that it's both a city, but there's also some ruined segments. So what might be a good idea is to maybe choose a stamp to represent the city part, and then to add some ruins onto that. Okay, so let's maybe choose one that I want here. And I want to give off this illusion that it's kind of a scavenger place. So these Nordic fortified ones, these work great. I feel like that suits with the idea of ice and snow, so we could probably use one of these. I kind of like these towers. This looks nice. But again, I want to focus on scale, so I'll just zoom in here and just see how big it is. That fits to about the same scale as this. If you all want, you can also just memorize the number 23, but I've kind of noticed that sometimes you do have to vary when you set a scale, like a number scale. It might vary, so it might be from 20 to 25 instead of just 23. Just know that you might have to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that location right there. And what I might want to also do is maybe diminish some of the color a little bit so it's not kind of bright. That might kind of give it that more ruined look. When I have this highly saturated, it kind of looks like it's well kept. I don't really think scavenger, right? I kind of think something else. So I'm going to desaturate it a little bit. I'm going to bring up the brightness a little bit. And I might want to bump up the contrast a little bit so it kind of pops out. Bring that saturation down. I think that works really well right there. I think that looks good. And then what I might want to do is add in some ruins around it because it is a ruined city. So we could throw in just a couple ruins, but this time I won't desaturate it, and I'll make the ruins a little bit smaller. Just put a couple. 1, 2, 3. Remember the rule: don't have them all be equidistant to each other. All right, make sure that you have a couple going in different areas right there like this. And then of course, I don't like, it's hard to determine the difference between the ground in the city and the ground outside the city. So whenever I feel like the texture doesn't work there, I'll end up trying to change it a little bit. So what I could do is maybe use some different textures here. So I'll select the FG layer. And what I think I'll do instead is I'll just use a gray texture, a flatter gray texture underneath here. That should help to make sure that this kind of pops out a little bit more. And I'll put a little bit underneath the ruins as well. And what that will do is it will help to distinguish between the landscape around it and the building itself. You can now see that there's a very big difference. Like this is maybe trampled ground. There's no need to add those grass textures because the grass has been all trampled by players and by people traveling around that area. So it kind of makes sense, right? So now that we've kind of put that together, we can kind of connect them. Remember, we have our location right here, these Frost Sentinel area. And so what I'll do is I'll look for the gate. Here's the gate, and I'll go ahead and just push this in. Don't forget to add in those curves, those what are called meandering like a river. And just make sure you do a lot of meanders, and then we'll connect it to this location right there. There you go. And now you have that building right there. Let's take a step back and just look at it. Yeah, I think that location looks good. We've added in a couple. All right, let's go ahead and add in one more and then we'll save it. So let's go into our notes. Let's add in our next one. This one's called Southford. It's the last, kind of the last bastion of like civilization before you get to like the scavengers. So this city is going to be a little bit more populated. It's not going to be in as much disrepair. So before the endless cold south, the Southford is kind of a rugged town for traders, fishers. There's some exiled criminals that live there, ones that won't even live in that northern city up there at the top where those scavengers live, and serves kind of a gateway to the north for adventurers. And it's probably one of the first places your players will go to before they start exploring. So if they kind of come from this location or this location over here, they'll probably travel to this location before they start exploring this part of that northern polar continent. So let's go ahead and add that. I'll probably want to add in like some kind of city stamp. We've already got city set up. I kind of like this human city right here. There's also this fortified city that might work well. I didn't mention that it was fortified, but it might not be a bad idea to add it in. I can also kind of just take a look at some other options that I have here. There's a lot here. I think I'm going to go with this kind of human fortified city right here, or this one right here. Sorry, this more human city here. I think this one kind of works well. We're going to add it right here. I'm going to scale it. I'm going to put it right here at the corner. In fact, I might want to make it like a harbor town. So what I'll do is I'll put it right, or a harbor city, and just put it right along the ledge of the coast there. So it's nice and set there. I might want to add in maybe some docks or something. I'm not sure if there is a dock or not. We can take a look. Oh, there is. Perfect. So to show that it is kind of a coastal city, I can add in a dock. If it was like a massive city, like a capital, then maybe you want to add like a larger dock system, like this really big one right here. If it's just a little village, like a little fishing village, then maybe consider only adding one of these smaller little docks right here, right? That would make more sense. So to show that it's a busy port city or capital, use the bigger one. It's kind of a medium size. I'm not going to say this is massive. So what I'll do is just kind of make a medium size one and place it right here. Just remember that there is a certain part of the dock that should go on the land, and that is where that faded edge is. So you can see this faded edge right here. That faded edge is what goes on the land. So just kind of remember that. And what I might want to do is just throw some small settlements outside of the city. So I can just type in human, and there should be some small just human buildings kind of floating around. So I can kind of just use a couple of these. Like maybe there's an inn that exists just outside of the town, and that's where your players are going to go before they go into this town right here, or this city. So we just throw a little inn right there, and then we'll go ahead and connect them. So we want to connect this route right here. You can start right here at the top, or you can move it anywhere along here. Like maybe it branches off and then follows the coast. A lot of roads follow coastlines, so we could do that. I don't really like where that went, so let's maybe go this way and do it again. We'll go in here, and I want to make sure that it connects to this one right here, and then it connects into here like that, because you start at this kind of tavern right here before you go in. And you have that. And of course, if you want, you can connect, right? So let's connect this one right here to this one. So now you have a loop, and it's that way you don't have to travel all the way along here up to here to go. So you have that split road right there. And I think that goes rather well together. Let's go ahead and take a step back. I think overall that looks good. Let's go ahead and save it because we're close to 100 changes, and then we'll move on to the next locations. We have a lot to cover, so I'm pretty excited about it. I'm excited also for labels, frames, filters, and a legend, because I think what I'll do is we're creating the major points of interest, but what's really nice is to create some rando villages or towns that don't have a specific major purpose to the overall campaign. They're just random towns and villages where you're trying to figure out, you might finish, okay, you might be like, well, there's a certain thing that I want to take place, but I don't know where it should take place. Well, those random little towns and villages that may not even have a name yet, or have any lore to it, they're perfect for that, right? These kind of locations that don't have any use to your players yet. I always just have at least a dozen of those on my map. So just in case, I had this certain idea of order of operations in which I thought the players were going to do, but they end up not doing that. And so I have these random towns just in case I go, okay, my players killed off an NPC that was supposed to progress more of the story, but because they killed off that NPC or because they didn't go to a certain location, instead they went to this other random location, I'll switch. I'll put another new NPC at that new location to carry out the rest of the story. So that's what I end up generally doing, to have these kind of random towns. So we'll finish the major locations first, and then we'll add those in. So I think overall, we added almost all the locations up here. We have a couple more in this kind of like crazy looking horn right here. So let's go ahead and add those. We've saved it. Let's go to the next one here. Right here we have the Lychans main. It's a tundra of rolling hills covered in kind of this bioluminescent moss and strange fungi that glows beneath with these kind of auras. Some believe the land itself is alive, guiding travelers towards hidden sanctuaries or into deadly traps. So this place kind of has a sense of aura to it. It's kind of interesting. And to show that there's some bioluminescent kind of moss there, I might want to consider adding some like light sources to kind of show that. So I'll just type in light. There isn't in fantasy world, so you'll have to go to like fantasy battle maps. And what I want to do is like pick a light stamp and then maybe pick a color. And fungus can be kind of whatever. And so I'm kind of thinking, instead of just going with like a regular yellow or orangish light, I think I'll put down a different color, because it is fantasy. So let's maybe have it be blue, because it is kind of in a polar like region. And so I think blue would work well. So I'll just take these little blue lights. I'm going to bring them up a little bit in height, a little bit in size. I'll just copy and paste and kind of place them. And remember, don't have them be equidistant. Cluster some of them with that quote unquote, what I call rule of 3, which is just having a cluster of them. And then don't forget to bring them down in different sizes. You don't want them all to be the same size. So maybe throw in a couple smaller ones next to a couple medium-sized ones, some big ones. There we go. And so now we have these kind of like bioluminescent moss. And then maybe we can even add in a slightly bigger one, like a big one like right here. There we go. And now I have some nice bioluminescent moss. And when your players are going around, now I have some kind of plot hook or an environmental element that I can kind of connect into the story by adding in at least one fantasy element. I generally, when I'm thinking about a region that I've made and I want to add points of interest, I try to focus not just on the realism, but also the fantasy element. Remember, it's a fantasy map. So add in fantastical elements like bioluminescent moss, things that defy the laws of physics, things that make no sense, like floating islands, things that don't exist in reality, right? Always throw in those fantastical elements. And the reason why that's so important is because it creates contrast. When you see something realistic clashing up against something that's unrealistic, it pops out, right? So you wouldn't normally have these kind of little blue glowing lights on the ground. And so that fantastical element pops out against the unfantastical or the more realistic thing. So it's a really good trick, is to create contrast and make things pop out. Realism versus or contrasts against the fantastic. So it's always important to kind of do that. All right, that was an easy one. All I had to do was add those bioluminescent little moss there. Let's go ahead and throw in some more locations. There's a lot. Let's go ahead and start here and kind of move our way down. The next one is Salt Spire. It's a towering kind of crystalline-like fortress-like tower. It's built upon a salt flat. It's home to kind of an enigmatic order of scholars who study the alchemical properties of salt. It is said that their archives hold secrets capable of reshaping the tides itself. Sometimes they're called tide mages or heralds of the tide. They have a lot of different kind of names. And so the focus here, the theme is kind of this kind of ocean-like theme. So it's kind of built on a salt flat. And so what this finger right here, this horn, it's a kind of a geographical feature called a horn. All of this right here used to be covered underwater right here. And so what I might want to do is maybe add a little bit of water around these areas on top of the tower to kind of show that this region was once covered in salt water. That's why it's called a salt pan, right? It dried up. And so now it's got a lot of salt in the soil. So the Salt Spire. So let's go ahead and first add in the main location, which is obviously going to be a tower. So I'll go back to Fantasy World, type in tower. Here we go. I'm going to pick a tower that I like. There's a lot of little options here. What I don't want to do is pick one that I've already used. So I think I'll use this one, this human sandstone one. I kind of like that. And of course, what's always helpful is to kind of use other POIs as a guide. So you notice that this tower right here, I think that fits there. Let's make it a little bit bigger so it's kind of noticeable. I'm going to put it right here on this corner. And you know what I think I'll also do is I think I'm going to put it on top of a rock, so that way it's built on a sturdy foundation. So if I type in rock, there should be some nice rock stuff that I can add in here. So I look here. Let's maybe use a mesa for it. I think that should look good. Let's use this really short mesa right here. I'm going to make it smaller right here. I'm going to I think this looks good. Let's maybe bring the brightness down a little bit so it kind of matches. Put it right here. This is going to be kind of like a plateau rock. And that's great because remember, it creates height, 1, and 2, it creates this foundation, right? If all of this was once underwater, this land might not be the perfectly stable land that's necessary to place something like a tower, which is going to need strong foundation, right? And so placing it on maybe this rock, this mesa that I used right here, is a good way to make sure that that tower is indeed on a sturdy foundation. So now that we've added that part, we can go into the next part. I'm going to paint some water on the ground. I'm going to use this blue texture right here. I'm going to set to FG layer. I'm going to bring the opacity down because what I don't want to do is have it set to 100%, where when I cover it, it's just this blue. I want to have some of the land underneath of it. So I'll bring the opacity down, and then I'll go in like this. And what I can do is maybe even tides, like a tide comes out. Let's say there's a high tide, and I'll have some water cutting off this finger right here. And it fits in with the tide theme, right? So I'll put some water there so that kind of represents a high tide. And then I'll kind of just put some water blotches in here to kind of represent the tide is up. There we go. And now some of that is underwater, as you would kind of expect with the tide being up. And it fits in with the theme, right? It's these wizards, these mages are tied in with the tides. So it kind of makes sense to kind of add in a tide-like element. So now that we have that in there, I think that works out well. Let's go ahead and let's maybe add in just a couple more things. I've noticed that this area is kind of flat. And so some things to add that might be nice is maybe just throwing in just a couple little things. It's somewhat different from a marshland. It's kind of a mix between, it's like a fantasy. I would say that this is kind of a fantasy biome because it's got tides, it's got salty like water or salty like soil, but it's not necessarily, it can be a little bit of dew. It's kind of a fantasy biome, I would say, because it's kind of a mix between a marsh and a tidal like area. But I want to add something to it because I noticed that there isn't a whole lot kind of going on there. Like I have a lot of flat land, and what might be nice is to kind of maybe throw in some elements to kind of make it more interesting. So I'm kind of looking over the catalog and just kind of looking for some things that might work well here. You know what might work well? I think we can maybe just use these icebergs right here, and then let's make them stones instead. So I'll bring the brightness down so they kind of have a stone look. I'll make them small. And then what this will do is that I don't want my players to like have to travel for several days through this area where there's nothing really that they're interacting with. So I want to throw in maybe a couple like rock formations in here, and it kind of fits well with this because there's a rock formation right here. So we should probably throw in some more rock formations. So I'll throw in a couple of them, like one here, and in this way the players will have something to interact with, because when a time comes to make a battle map, there's not going to be much on the battle map except for just this flat grassland, right? And so what will make the combat more interesting is when they come upon these like rock-like formations, I'll have a rock formation to build where combat will take place, and the players will be able to travel up on top of things, jump down, throw things. They'll have a little bit more height and depth to work with when the combat comes. So it's nice to throw in these elements. Let's go ahead and throw in maybe one like up in the corner right here. And then what I'll do is I'll bring the scale down and just make some smaller ones. And don't forget to cluster them. Maybe put a couple here. Maybe put one right over here. A smaller one over here. And now we have these nice formations. And then I can go in with that path tool. And then when I go to connect, I'll go through this land right here, kind of traveling through. And then I go through this first rock formation. And then we'll go to the next rock formation. And then to this rock formation. And then finally kind of going towards here. There you go. And now you kind of have a nice path as well, connecting those points of interest that kind of connect over to here. So now we have a lot of good locations here. I generally factor in things like, oh, what kind of combat will take place here? It kind of helps me to add points of interest and where to add things. So it's kind of helpful. One other thing I might want to consider doing as well is just maybe throwing in some random kind of trees just to add in some final little details. So that way not everything is flat. Because right now I have a lot of flat land. So let's just take a couple trees, and I think I'll use the similar trees that I used over here. I think these ones work good. And don't forget to overlap. So I have this nice path right here. Let's have a couple trees overlap the path. Let's have a couple overlap the rock formation. Let's have a couple just randomly hanging out over here. Some over here overlapping this. Over here, here, and then just a couple single onesie kind of randos, just kind of further as you go up, right through here like this. We'll put a couple here. Technically, in reality, these trees probably wouldn't grow here because they're salt, but it's a fantasy-like place, right? So it's okay. And if you want to show that, I can just kind of remove the trees from the upper part up here. The trees exist here, but once you start going higher up to where the tides come in, then you probably won't have a lot of grassland, right? So it kind of makes sense to have very little grass and vegetation because much of that land has been taken with salt. But you can always do a fantasy thing, right? You can have maybe a fantasy tree or a fantasy type of plant that grows in salt water, right? Or in salt like soil. So you can totally do that. So definitely play around. Don't be afraid to step outside of realistic and go with fantasy, because again, that's going to contrast a lot more, right? It's going to be like, whoa, this is crazy. This tree is, or this plant is growing in this salt rich soil. And so that maybe that's an interesting little story. Maybe your players need to catch this rare plant that grows in this area and brings it back in a fetch quest. So all kinds of interesting kind of things. Definitely go with the fantasy elements. All right, we have a lot more to go, a lot more to go, and we're running out of time. So let's go ahead and get a lot done. Okay. So the tool to make those land, where I made those roads, is the line tool, if I understood your question correctly. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one because we have a lot to cover here. There's so much. Now, we did this POI over here. We did this one. Let's go ahead and add more. Oh, you're most welcome, by the way, Hobo Gaming. Okay, so Swampfolk Village. It's a labyrinthian-like settlement built atop stilts in the heart of a massive swamp. These villagers are expert survivalists. They rely on poisons. It's a swamp, and I kind of tropey to add like poisons to kind of swamp. It's they're traps and unpredictable terrain to kind of keep invaders or outsiders at bay. So not a lot of people kind of come here. So what I want to do is I want to kind of create this illusion of like villages on stilts. So what I can do is maybe just type in village, and we can kind of look at our village options. And if nothing is on stilts, it's okay. You probably wouldn't even be able to see stilts. You could do a couple things to make it more interesting. I'm going to go look through the catalog. I don't think there's any stilt-like stuff, but you could use things to like represent a stilt. For instance, you could probably use this tower right here. You could probably use multiple of these to kind of create this illusion of stilts. So what I could do is maybe choose a building of my choice, like this village building right here. I could take this right here. Whenever I'm editing a POI, I try to bring this scale up, right? So that way it's easier to edit. So I'll go ahead and place this here. It looks like it's the wrong color, so let's desaturate it. Let's just make it nice and small. Copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And I've got some stilts right here. Then I can go ahead and create group, create, and then I have this stilt-like structure right here available for use. And I can go ahead and just place it right down in here. Not every single one of them has to be on stilts, but I'm at least going to put some on stilts, like that one will be on stilts. The location is a bit big compared to the trees, but again, you want to be able to see the POI. Remember what we talked about earlier. There's two different scales, the scales of the points of interest and the scale of the terrain. And then there's even a third one. It's the distance in which you're going to be traveling. So that just kind of makes it easier. Let's go ahead and add in a couple more village pieces. Like let's put in a couple smaller ones. Like I'll put one right here. Let's put one over here. This bend right here, I think that looks good. Let's put one over here in this kind of corner right here. And then let's maybe put a smaller one right over here, right in that little spot. So I have some nice little villages right inside of here. Yes, you could always use, oh, that's a great idea, docks. I love that idea. Yeah, you could totally use docks. That's a great idea. Let's do that. Great thinking, by the way. Love that. I'm so jealous. Why didn't I think of that? I love it. Good stuff. Though, to be honest with you, it would be very small. See, they'd be really small. You'd barely be able to see them. But it's okay. It's okay if they're really small. We can just like put some boardwalk in here. In fact, we can probably use a kind of a larger one. Ooh, you kind of notice that you can't see some of the assets here. If ever you are going through the catalog and you notice that some assets are missing because you notice that there's this open area right here, don't worry about that. Just go to expand at all assets or show names and it will expand everything. It's just a nice little workaround, a little glitch that kind of happens once in a while. Let's go ahead and use this big one right here because it's kind of large and I can kind of place it like right here. I think I'll put it underneath everything like this. There we go. So it's kind of underneath over here. There we go. Right about there. Looks good. So you can kind of see some docks kind of going in there. There we go. And so then we have that and I want to connect, of course. So I'll go in. I'm going to put it this area right here. Just kind of connect this path to this one. And I'm going to bring the scale down because I don't need to have that large scale in that snow-like area. So I'll kind of bring it back down to its original scale. There we go. We've connected that area over there with this one. Okay, I think that looks good. Let's go ahead and add our next location. This one right here. It's called the Dull Barren Salt Pan. It's an expansive salt pan that stretches for miles, hiding lost cities, forgotten relics beneath its shimmering surface. Treasure hunters often disappear searching for riches buried beneath this endless expanse. So what we can do is we can throw in a bunch of ruins in this area. And what we can do is we've been adding a lot of ruins to a lot of our locations. And so we're kind of using a lot of the same ruin stamps. And so to kind of make sure that they're a little bit different, let's use a different blend mode. We'll go with luminosity. And you'll notice that it picks up the same color of what's behind it. See how it's over here when I go to luminosity? Over here, it kind of keeps that yellow color. If I go to normal, like this, it kind of gets that other color. So you do luminosity when you want the building you're adding to have the same color or material beneath it. Now that I've scaled it, I can kind of bring it down over here and just kind of add in a couple ruins scattered about. Just make sure that you have that luminosity blend mode set up. So I'll put like maybe a tower over here. Let's put another one like over here. Another one over here. And remember, just not to have them be equidistant from each other. So we'll have a couple here, have one even farther over here. And now you kind of have a couple ruined locations for your players to explore. When they go into the Dull Barren they can go ahead and walk around, explore the flats, and then have some of these ruined locations. Ruins, towers, shrines are all great ways of adding in these kind of random locations for your players to kind of encounter. Now, I did add in some like plateau stuff up here, so I'll probably add in some random locations that aren't necessarily important. They're just kind of random locations. So I'll probably add those in later. Let's just go on to the next one because we got a lot to cover here. Let's go to this one over here. Riverfolk Collective, a loose alliance of river-dwelling communities bound by trade and a shared reverence for the waterways. They are skilled navigators, ferrying goods and people across Azrathal's treacherous rivers and deltas. So what I want to do is, you notice that there's only one river here. So what I might want to consider doing is probably make a couple rivers, because it's called the Riverfolk, and I don't want it to be just one river. I want it to be multiple. So what I might want to consider doing is maybe creating a couple of tributaries that go off and don't end up going to the ocean. And then maybe creating a river delta here as well. So that way I can kind of really push the river theme really, really hard. So I'll go ahead and first create some... Oopsie, I've got the wrong scale here. Let me go over to my favorites. I think I've got the right size. Here we go. And a good place to kind of create these is where there's a bend. So there's a bend right here, and I can kind of cause it to kind of go out like that. And same thing here, another bend right here. And then we can create maybe another bend right here, a smaller one, kind of going this way, like that. So bends are a great way to kind of add those tributaries. Then we'll add the delta part. And so with the delta part, I'm going to have several mouths to this river that connect out. One going that way, another one that kind of connects here. We can maybe even kind of connect this one like that, and then even kind of connect this one kind of like that. So now we definitely have a more riverland kind of feel to it. We can even add even some more kind of branching out like this. There we go. Let's add another one like right here like this. Okay, now we really have a riverland kind of theme, and then we can start adding in the structures that should go in there. So let's go ahead and pick some structures that we want to choose. I think we can start with like maybe a larger town or city, and then we'll have some other smaller towns around that. So we should probably pick one that we want to have. I think maybe this human town right here should work well. Let's make sure that the scale is correct. Just kind of go over to here and kind of check everything, make sure the scale is right. I think this scale works about well. Let's go over here. Let's go ahead and put a major location like right here, where a lot of the river kind of connects. So you have a lot of river there. And then I'll go ahead and add some smaller settlements around that. So let's go to human or humna here. And then I can kind of just pick some buildings that I kind of want to be scattered about that kind of represent. So and the good places are like right in these little crevices right here. All along here is good. Let's put one there. Oh, that's the same one. Let's not use the same one. Put one there. Let's put a couple along here. Let's put one here. Let's put one up here. Here. Oopsie, I kind of realized these are all need to go up a layer. Select all from the set. Go up a layer. There we go. And now we kind of have a little bit more of the Riverland kind of feel to it with a major location and then some smaller ones kind of sprinkled about. So I think that kind of really probably completes a little more of it. And then, of course, I probably want to add in maybe some trees and some more landscape stuff because there seems to be kind of flat here. So I'll probably throw in a couple trees. And remember the trick to overlap. So I'm just going to place maybe a couple trees. I want them to be overlapping the river a little bit. Here, here. Let's add a couple here, here, here. Here, let's make a larger cluster, like right here. Remember, it's not a forest land, it's a river land, so I'm not going to have a lot of forest. I just want to add some trees here and there, so it kind of adds a little bit more to the natural landscape. Just little clusters. Always remember the overlap. Some here. Let's also have some overlap this town. There we go. Add a couple more scattered here. Let's not have some by the delta. Too far, too close. Here, 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 and then let's add in a couple more details. Let's go ahead and add one more bush to add a little bit more terrain detail. So we can throw in this little green bush right here, bring the scale down, and just place a couple here and there, scatter them. There we go. Good places to put them are along the river, right? Think about what plants need. They need water. A river has a lot of water, so it's a great place to put trees, grass, plants, bushes. Rivers are great for that. So make sure that you kind of do that. And one thing you can also do to show that it's kind of a verdant space is you can take a green texture and then you can paint underneath wherever the river is this kind of green texture like this to kind of represent that there is this verdant, like kind of green going on. If you don't like that light color green, then you can just go back and choose a darker green if you want. That is a little bit bright, so we can kind of choose maybe this one instead. And then I have this nice green texture that kind of goes along the river, which is what you would expect, right? Because there's lots of water and it's getting lots of water that it needs. So we'll go ahead and throw a little bit of water here, or a little bit of green grass here. And then, of course, I maybe want to choose a different color for underneath this location and underneath some of these other locations. A little bit of this gray texture, just to kind of remember that, hey, this is separate. There we go. And now we have that kind of region done. And then we can go ahead and connect it, right? We can go ahead and bring those together. So we'll go ahead and choose this. We're going to go up here. Let's find where our locations are. Let's go have it to where it connects into here. And your players can choose to go into this barren wasteland here or not. We'll kind of connect here. Let's go and make sure that it goes behind the mountain so that creates that overlap. I'm going to reconnect. Don't forget to add those curves. And we'll have the road lead to the main location here. There we go. And now you have a road kind of leading to there. Let's take a step back. 200 changes, quite a bit. Let's save it. Okay. And then we'll add in the remaining ones. This is probably going to go on for another hour or so, just to let you guys know. But I can always, just like we did with the masterclass, the stairs and roofs, I went ahead and I can kind of cut it up into smaller clips as well. I know some of you are crunched for time. Not everyone has, a solid 2 hours to sit down and watch a full stream. So I'll make sure to kind of upload the whole stream, and then I'll cut them up into smaller segments. That's just a lot easier for people. I understand you have jobs, kids, all that stuff. So totally understandable. Okay, let's go ahead and add in the next location. I think that looks good. Let's take a look. We've added in that one. We've added in that one. Let's add in the last location right here. Rainworst City. It's a perpetually rain-soaked port where pirates and smugglers thrive. A place of lawless opportunity where fortunes are made and lost overnight amid the storm-lashed streets and hidden coves. So we're probably going to choose some kind of city. It's kind of a port town. So what I might want to do is have it be two parts. See, I have this convenient island right here. So I could probably put like a lighthouse on the island and then have some of the city be on the main part of the land and then maybe have a bridge kind of connecting them. So I'm going to choose like a human capital of some kind maybe. Like I could choose this one, or let's choose this human castle. Oh, you know what? This capital right here will work out fine. Let's use this one. It needs to be a little bit bigger. This is a town. This is a city, so we'll make it a little bit bigger. And I think I'll put it just right here on this corner. We'll make it just a teeny bit bigger. And then I'll take a bridge. A brudge, if you don't know what a brudge is. And then I'll kind of take that bridge and kind of connect it across like this. It connects to the island. And then I'll go ahead and add in another element in there. So we could maybe add in like a lighthouse of some kind. I'm not sure if there is a lighthouse. We could add in site light. Oh, there is a lighthouse. This one right here. Perfect. We'll put a lighthouse just right here on this island. That's perfect. And in fact, I'll probably just connect it like right here like this. There we go. And in fact, I might choose a red just for the continuity of it. I think I might choose a city that has a red roof color to it instead. So let's type in capital. Is there a red one? Let's take a look. There we go. This one right here. Perfect. Now we kind of stick with that kind of same theme. Let's maybe bump the saturation up a little bit so it kind of gets that reddish color. Let's maybe bump the contrast up a little bit. There we go. And then I can kind of get that more reddish light color so I have some continuity in the roof colors. And then, of course, I might want to maybe, of course, add in a couple small buildings on the outside. So if I just type in human, there should be some of these small red-like buildings. Let's take a look and see if I can find them. these red buildings right here. These will work just fine. Let's throw in a couple of these. Let's make sure that I have the scale right. So let me see how big these are. They're kind of the same ones as these buildings, so I'll have to bring the scale down. There we go, right about there. And then I'll just kind of place them kind of randomly outside of the city. And then I'll place a couple over here on this island as well. There we go. And so I have this nice city right here. And I have that lighthouse. I might want to consider adding in kind of a light source at the lighthouse. So I can just change the hue back to a color. And then I can kind of place this light just right there so that I can show that it's a lighthouse. And then, of course, I should probably connect those. So let's go ahead and connect this main route. And then just kind of connect right here into this city. And there you go. Okay. So I think that looks good. Let's keep going. We've got a lot to cover still. Let's go on to the next one. We finished with this continent, I think. So we should maybe move on to this far one right here. And let's kind of add these ones. With the Goblin Nation, it's a sprawling network of like tunnels and fortress cities ruled by cunning goblin overlords. Trade, trickery, and backstabbing are the way of life here, with countless factions vying for power through deceit and sabotage. It's all about getting up on the layer cake, right? Just kind of screwing over your fellow goblin to kind of get to the top. And so it's kind of a cutthroat-like society where, you know, it's each kind of goblin out for themselves. There's some kind of collective endeavor that kind of goes on, but for the most part, it's kind of every goblin for themselves. So it's kind of a chaotic like society with all this kind of looking out for yourself mentality. And so they're kind of prone to easily being attacked. They're easily defeated because they're just not very well united. So something that your players can think about when they maybe get ambushed by a party of goblins, maybe your bard can kind of try to convince them to fight against each other or whatever. So kind of helpful like little things there. So what I want to do is maybe pick something to kind of represent a goblin-like town. And you know what? I don't think there is anything specific for goblin. So if I type it in, it isn't. But what can take its place is orc. And so I can probably use some orc locations. And then some of them are fortress cities. So why don't we end up using some of these orc cities right here to kind of represent our goblin locations. So I'll bring the scale up a little bit to make sure that I get the scale right. Let's go up to 23. I think that looks good. Let's throw in one major city right here. This is like the major goblin fortress. And then we'll add in a couple villages. One here. And then we'll add in one over here. Another orc village over here. Or not orc, sorry. Goblin village here. And then we'll add in some rando little buildings, little settlements here and there. There we go. And so now we kind of have our nation of goblins here that's set up. And to kind of give it a little bit more interesting feel, we could probably throw in some of these kind of bone-like arches. So I could throw in like this bone arch right here and throw in like maybe another bone arch. And then maybe this is a path that kind of leads from this area up into that location. So when I put down my path, I'll have a clear destination that kind of leads to this major one. And then you have all these other little tiny goblin locations here. So I'll take the path tool here. And what I'll do is I'll have the path, or the line tool, and I'll just gonna go underneath these locations, and I'll just go like that, and that kind of leads to that location right there. So now I have those nice locations there. And then what I might want to also consider is that I want to show that these guys have probably like cut down, like they're industrious in a lot of the ways that they kind of run things. They're warlike, and so they're always kind of like looking for materials to show that, you know, that it's kind of that way. One thing I can do is throw in some dead trees. So if I type in tree, I don't think they're stumps, and you probably wouldn't even see a stump. But we can do is kind of throw in some like these kind of white snag like trees. So I'll just throw in a couple of these kind of white trees. And what this will also do is it kind of matches in with the same color of the bone. And so it kind of creates this color palette continuity because I've added in these pale like arches, and now I'm adding in these pale like trees, dead trees. And that should continue to kind of add and stick with the theme of what I'm going for here. There we go. So now I have some of that. And of course, I might want to consider adding in just a little bit of white texture underneath my location here. Ooh, I like that. The bones of dead large monsters. Oh, I love that idea, Jonathan Frost. Great call. Oh, also, hi, Zoethar. Sorry that I missed you there. I wanted to say hi the first time chatter. Glad that you're here. Okay, yeah. So that goblin region I think looks good. I don't think I really need to add any more. I mean, you could add in those bones. I like that fallen idea, but there are no real skeletons. There's these bone-like decorations right here. We could use these to kind of represent the border of this nation. So I could maybe put a couple of these kind of like this. I can just take these very specific ones, place one here, place one here, place one here, place one here. And then now this line of bone-like things right here kind of represent the border of this goblin nation right here. So that kind of works well. Now, we could use there. I don't really want to go too far out of the style, but there are some fantasy regional skeletons that could work here, like these ones right here. So if you wanted to show that maybe there was the skeletons of dead creatures, like for instance, one thing we could add to the lore here is that these goblins worship these long dead creatures that lived here, right? And so what we could do is put some of these skeletons kind of hanging out on the rocks. I'll bring the saturation down a little bit, and we'll add in a couple of these kind of skeletons. And this is one way to kind of represent, like, hey, these are the bones of their gods, kind of floating around here. So I think that's one thing that we could do here. So if you want, you could add that in there. This is in the fantasy regional style. It's not in the fantasy world style, but it's kind of one thing that you could do in there. I do like that idea a lot, Jonathan. So I think I will kind of throw those in there. So good thinking on your part, by the way. I like it. Good idea. So we'll throw in those bones. It's okay. I think that when there is a contrast, like when you're using a stamp from Fantasy Regional and you're putting it in Fantasy World, there is an inconsistency in the way the style of the stamp, shadows, the line work. But when you're working at this scale and it's this small, I kind of feel that the inconsistency is a little harder to see. So at this scale, it works out okay. It's just when you start getting into the much larger scales, because remember, Fantasy Regional is at a much larger scale than Fantasy World is. So once you start scaling up Fantasy World stamps to Fantasy Regional size, the line work starts getting wonky, and then vice versa. When you start scaling up or scaling down Fantasy Regional and they start going down to Fantasy World, you'll notice that there is a line consistency thickness. And so you just kind of have to factor that in when you're adding stamps across styles. Okay? Okay. I think that region looks good. One thing I might want to consider doing is maybe just throwing in a little bit of red on the ground, I think, just to kind of add a little bit more continuity to the ground thing. So I'll go into Fantasy World and kind of look for a reddish, like, ground texture. I think this one right here, this kind of brown wasteland looks okay. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of place some here and there. A little bit of red there, a little bit of red there, a little bit of red here, a little bit of red there. And that should kind of finish some of the continuity. So now we have red buildings, a little bit of patches of red, like barren dirt, and then as well as the grass. So I think that goes well together. We'll save, and then we'll go on. Yes, Adam, we will absolutely make this map clonable. As soon as I finish this, I will load the video to YouTube, and I will include the link to the map in the video description so you can clone and edit it for your own personal use. Absolutely. No, there's no reason to spend all this time working on this map, and then nobody in here can use it. So we'll absolutely do that. Don't worry. We'll make that available. Okay, so we've got a lot done here. I'm loving all these locations. We'll probably go on for at least another hour here because there's a lot to cover. So think of it as a little double whammy. All right. Hey, Gloria. Glad that you joined us. First time chatter. Glad that you're here. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's a good compliment. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and continue because we have a lot more to add here. Let's go add in the Shattered Coast. It's a jagged shoreline riddled with shipwrecks and remnants of ancient fortresses. The tides here are unpredictable, and rumors tell of kind of a hidden pirate kingdom that kind of lurks among the scattered islands. So what I want to do here is I'm probably going to create a series of scattered islands. Now, before I didn't use the add mode of the mask tool to create this land. I actually used the shape tool, but it's okay if you use use both, right? So what I'll do is I want to create just a couple little islands in here. So I'll make sure that I'm enabled, my mask effects are off. I want to make sure that my edgy brush is selected. This is the edgy brush. And I want to make sure to remove the smooth. And then I want to bring the roughness all the way down to 3 and the brush size down to 1. And what I'm going to do is just going to create just a couple kind of broken up, scattered islands in here. And then those are going to be the locations where I'm probably going to put some pirate settlements and stuff like that. So let's do that first. So now I have my little scattered islands. Let's go ahead and look up shipwrecks. And there should be some shipwrecks in here. We're going to use the isometric ones. Let's make sure to bring the scale down a little bit. It's okay if they're a little big because you want to be able to see them. So I'll throw in a wreck there. Let's throw in a wreck halfway in the water and half on the land there. Let's throw in another wreck over here. And these shipwrecks right here are actually where the settlements are. So when your players get on a rowboat and start going to each one of these little islands, you'll notice that it's a community of these pirate settlements on these islands here. And of course, the only way to get to these islands, there's no bridge. You can't walk. You have to go by boat. Okay, so we have these nice pirate-like locations here. That works out rather well. We could create a road that kind of connects that over to that location so we can have it along the border here and then kind of make our way over to here. And if we want, just to kind of indicate that there's something going on here, we could maybe throw in like an arch or some kind of design element that kind of makes it look like the entrance to this area. And so we could just take like an arch, this little dwarven arch right here. This one works fine. Let's maybe just put a little arch right here. I don't know about the red color. Let's maybe change it to like maybe a bluish color so that kind of fits more with like the ocean theme. So we'll pick with blue. I'm going to desaturate it a little bit, bring the brightness up a little bit. And then we have this kind of blue arch that kind of leads out into this area right here. And there's no need to add roads because you're not going to be walking out to this region. You're going to be going by boat. One thing we could do, though, is add in some docks to each little island. And of course, since they're little tiny settlements, you don't need to add a massive dock. So just add in a small one, right? So let's add in a small little dock, like right here. Let's bring the scale down a little bit, just so it's nice and small. Little dock here. Let's add another dock right here. Let's add another dock for this one right there. Let's add a dock for this one. Let's see here. I think it's this way. Oopsie, no, I think I went the wrong way. My mistake. Let's do one more. Undo that. I want to make sure I'm facing the right way. I can't remember which one it is. You know what? I'm going to scale it up so I can see it. There we go. There we go. Perfect. Okay. And then we have a nice dock going to that one. There we go. We have some access points. And if you want, you can also throw in maybe you could throw in some rock, some kind of rock formation or some kind of stones over there if you wanted to show some kind of elevation change. You could do that. Let's take a look at what we got here. You could use, let's see here. Ooh, oh, right here, small rock outcroppings. These are perfect. To show some like rocky outcroppings, let's put a little bit of these little rocks on here. Some rocky outcroppings. And you know what? Let's put some bigger ones on land. Just so that it kind of pops out a little bit more. I don't want to have just... So now we have some interesting kind of rock formations for your players to kind of interact with. And it gives this region a little bit more character because we have those plateau rocks or those kind of rocks right there. So I think that works out well. Okay, we've got a lot to go. Let's keep going. All right, let's go to the next one. This next location is the Windwalker Plains. You know what? It's a sacred expanse of grasslands and scattered standing stones. So let's continue our standing stones over here. Oh, they're standing. Those are not really standing stones. So you know what? Let's take these floating rocks right here. And you know what? We're going to make it look like these rocks are kind of standing on their points. And this is going to give it a weird kind of fantasy element. Like, how are these giant rocks on points with little points at the bottom? Technically, these are floating rocks, but how are they staying upright on the ground, right? And so this will give it this kind of sense of fantastical element. So I'll throw a bunch of these kind of in here. Don't forget to have them various sizes. I'll put one over here. Let's put a cluster, a couple of them together. Let's even have some of them even kind of leaning in different directions. So I'll have one leaning that way. I'll have one leaning over here by this river. One leaning over here. One over here. Let's have some leaning against each other as well. So I can put one right here. And then let's have this one leaning up against this one. Let's have another one like right here leaning against that one. Let's overlap, put one over here so it kind of overlaps the ocean to give it a little bit more depth. And let's kind of put some smaller ones over here. So now we kind of have these kind of weird standing stones that kind of stand up, upright. And the players don't really know why or how they stand upright that, right? Maybe how is it that winds and rain and erosion hasn't caused these rocks to tip over? So it kind of adds a fantastical element to it that adds an excellent story. Like maybe these are magical stones that were created by wizards. And when you get closer to them, you kind of see these glowing runes inside of them. And so what's keeping them in place is maybe magic. And maybe there's a story behind that, giving your players an idea about what they can kind of encounter in that area. So I think that's a good element to kind of add in there. Let's go ahead and add in another POI. Quite a bit to do here. The pinnacles. It's a jagged spires of stone rising from the ocean and the land, home to like reclusive monks and hermits who kind of just seek enlightenment. They're kind of by themselves. They prefer not to be bothered. But the harsh conditions make survival difficult. But those who survive have found to live rather well at the base of the mountain. So we have the pinnacles. That's these sharp, jagged rocks right here that kind of cut off this desert-like area right here. And so I want to create some settlements in this kind of more desert-like area at the base where these hills are. And so what I can do is go type in desert, and there should be some desert buildings in here. Let's go ahead and expand all assets. Let's show all the names. And there should be some like desert-like buildings in here. Here they are right here. These desert-like buildings right here. These are going to work perfect. So let's go up, get the scale down, make sure I have the scale right. Let's go with 17, that should be fine. I'm going to place them right on top of these hills. So one there, one right there. Oh, I don't want to use the same one for every single one. Let's put one there, and then let's put another one over here like this. There we go. So now I have these kind of nice settlements all along here. Yep, I could totally add a shadow there if I wanted to, but I don't want them to be floating necessarily. I do want them to be standing, but you could add a shadow underneath them by just painting a little darker color underneath. You could totally do that. That's totally doable, and it looks nice too. So I think we have just a very simple kind of settlement here. I didn't want to add too much, but I just wanted to show that that there were these settlements at the base of these pinnacles right here. It's just there's not much real estate at the top of these pinnacles for civilization or for people to live. So, and I've kind of put them at the base here, right next to this kind of horned-like desert right here. Okay, that region is done. Let's go ahead and add in one more, and then we'll go ahead and save it. Vernon's Wash. It's a salt-ravaged wasteland where remains of ancient naval battles rest beneath the marsh. Occasional storms kind of uncover, like when a big storm comes by, these strong winds will rip up the dirt, actually pull the land up off like the grass and some of the stuff. And when it does that, when those strong storms come by, sometimes they uncover like ruins and relics. And so adventurers often go to this area after a large giant storm. They kind of quickly all bolt over to that region to kind of get to do their treasure hunting. So it can kind of be kind of a volatile-like area with all these factions and peoples, adventurers trying to find wherever they can, wherever the land has been pulled up to find these treasures and stuff. So it's kind of a riddled area. We want to put maybe some ruins. Maybe we want to have like maybe some strong winds carried in some shipwrecks as well. Because remember, it's strong storms, so maybe a couple boats got thrown onto the land into that area. And of course, that adds kind of a more fantastical element, right? You don't normally find shipwrecks somewhere in the middle of a continent, right? You normally find shipwrecks in an ocean or a lake or along a river or something, right? And so having shipwrecks on land is definitely going to have this feeling of things like popping out. So if we type in ship, we can kind of add in these shipwrecks. And I don't want to add too many. We'll add a couple. And it makes for a great battle map too, right? When the time comes to make this a battle map, you'll have this boat that's kind of on a rock in the middle of a continent, and it will make for a very interesting combat, right? Your players will be able to walk on the land, go up onto the ship part, the ruined ship parts, and it adds for just a much more unique combat situation. So I'll throw in maybe just a couple shipwrecks. I don't want to add in too many, just a couple. Let's just put in 2 for now. And I'll put them a little closer to the ocean so that way, because it would mean that these ships got blown in for hundreds of miles. Okay, that's some really powerful storms. So just to kind of go with both fantasy and a little bit of realism, I'll bring those boats a little closer to shore. A little bit closer, not too far. This is still like many, many miles from the ocean, but I do want that fantastical element. And so then I'll throw that in, and then I'll probably want to throw in some ruins as well. You know what? I think I'll do the flat ones instead of the isometric ones, because we've been using a lot of the isometric ones. So I'll just throw in the flat ones just to kind of break that up a little bit. So I'll throw in some ruins here in this area. Remember not to make them equidistant from each other. Have some close to each other. Have some be far away from each other. Let's put those 2 close to each other. Let's put this one medium distance. Put this one over here. Let's put this in the center. And I'll move this one closer to the shore. There we go. And so now you have a series of like places that your players can kind of adventure through. Let's also throw in some different types of trees, and let's have them tipped over to show that there's strong winds in here. Let's take some trees and let's have them be uprooted. So I could take like maybe this dead tree right here, because all the leaves would have been blown off, right? So I'll take a couple dead trees and place them, and then I'll also rotate them and have a couple just laying on the ground like this. And I'll kind of have them be facing in a direction to kind of show that the wind has kind of knocked them over. So a couple can be upright and a couple can be down, like they fell over because of these strong, strong winds. Maybe even have a couple leaning up against this mountain right here. Kind of makes sense. The wind has blown these trees way out of the way. And of course, this also adds for a little bit more interesting location for your players for combat, right? If they're walking just randomly through the field and they come upon all these trees that have all the leaves have been ripped off, the branches have been ripped off, there's trunks and stuff everywhere. This makes for a great battle map, right? Players can jump on top of the logs, they can throw branches, rocks that have been kind of caught in between the logs. So it's kind of a great place for combat, having these kind of trees falling everywhere, and it adds a little bit more to the story. Let's go ahead and connect this location. We want to connect the location. So let's go ahead and go over here. Let's go ahead and have this kind of traveling through these stones, and then we'll kind of have it be going towards this location right here. Don't forget to really add in those curves. And what I'll do is I'm not going to have this road lead to any specific location. I'm just going to have it kind of go through kind of like this, and we'll have it go into a loop. And it's not really meant to lead to a specific location. And this way your players don't really have a specific location to go to. They can stop at all these separate little locations here, and they can loop around and then go either double back or go to the next place that they want to go to. So it's kind of a nice little way to add that in there. And of course, whenever you create these long loops like this, you can always connect them. Don't forget, let's say that you don't want to have to go all the way to the Goblin lands, and so I kind of connect the road right here, and that way I don't have to go your players don't have to go all the way around through here. They can kind of take this other route to get there. Let's go ahead and save it. We're going to do the last remaining locations in that last southern island, and then we are going to do the next thing, which is labels, frames, filters, and legend. Those ones will go a lot faster. These POIs take a little bit more time because we have to read the blurb, and then we have to try to figure out how to get the location to match the blurb on top of adding a little bit more information. Let's go ahead and take a step back and look at it. Yep, there is a lot going on here. So I think the remaining locations are over here on this island right here. So let's get cracking on that. Let's do, oh, there is one over here that I missed right here. The Endscape City. We better get to that one as well. Let's create Endscape City. Let me read it real quick. It's a radiant metropolis built at the edge of the Nimbus Bridge, home to scholars, mages, alchemists. It's a city, it's a place of wonder and peril, where magic experiments often go awry and eccentric inventors are always vying for patronage. So there are these mages, or I guess you can call them an artificers, that kind of live in this city, and they're well known for making these inventions. They're generally very eccentric, and they like this larger city because they're always looking for patrons to help fund their experiments and their kind of inventions and stuff. So we want to make sure that the city kind of has that feel to it. And so one thing we could do is to make it an industrious city is to add in like one that has like a observatory. There should be an observatory right here. This will give it that kind of inventor like feel to it. Let's also throw in another capital or a city here. Let me take a look here. Let's use one of these bigger ones. Let's use a purple one. I think that will go well. Let's use this nice purple color here. I don't think I used... Did I use that same one over here? I just want to make sure that I'm not using the same stamps. Nope, I don't see it. Great, perfect. All right, so I think purple is a good color for this. I want to kind of scale it up against the other larger cities just to make sure that I have it right. That is a massive city. I think that's about the right size. That's about the size of a village, so I think that looks okay. So let's go ahead and put that right over here. And then I might even want to consider maybe putting this like right over here, or I can put it on the very top if I want. Like I could just take the hue and then maybe give it a little bit more of a purple color. Let's go with this. Let's bring the brightness down. Let's bring the contrast up so I can really get that same purple. Then I can kind of just place it just like maybe right on top of there like that. And now I have this kind of right there. So kind of should give it kind of a, I don't know, a kind of an inventor like city feel to it. And then of course I might want to maybe throw some small settlements around it using that same purple buildings. And so I'll just place a couple in the outskirts. And now I have that nice kind of purple there. There we go. I think that goes out nicely. And of course we want to connect. So I'll go ahead and just have a little crossing right here that goes to the river. To go through here and then connects to here. And then this route kind of connects to there. And I think that purple adds well to it. Let's also add a little bit of texture just underneath, right? A little bit of white underneath it, just so that there's a distinguishing from the natural terrain and then the human or whatever species lives here. The material underneath it. And then also that whitish light gray texture helps to make the POI pop out a little bit more because it's this dark purple against this lighter, whiter color underneath. Nice little trick there. All right, so that's complete. Let's go ahead and add in the last locations here. It's a long, long video today, isn't it, everyone? Okay, let's go ahead and start on this bottom island here. A Sidar village, a quiet fishing village on the southern coast where the people live in harmony with the sea. Many claim the waters here are enchanted, offering bountiful catches and to strange luminescent creatures that kind of glow in the depths. In other words, they kind of think of these kind of undersea dwellers as kind of like spirits, and so they're giving them offerings so they won't kind of climb onto the land and maybe attack them. Though, who knows? There might be a mystery to what they really are. Who knows, right? Adds a little feeling to it. So let's go ahead and throw in a little village. I don't know why I haven't set to all caps. Let's add in a village here. Let's expand all assets. Then kind of look at what I got here. I like this little eastern village right here. I think that could work good. We could use this Nordic village right here as well because it kind of fits with the landscape. So let's go ahead and just place it right up against here. I kind of want it to be kind of a port. Remember, we kind of worship these bioluminescent creatures. So let's go ahead and throw in a dock. There we go. Let's, it's just a village, so it doesn't have to be a big dock. So we can make it medium size. Nothing too massive. Let's put a dock just right there. And let's put another one on the other side going this way. Right here as well. There we go. So now we kind of have these docks for that village right there. I think that looks good. And just to give it a little bit of texture underneath, we'll put a little bit of white. underneath. There we go. That makes it pop out. Remember that little trick? There's all kinds of neat little tricks we can do with POIs. You can also give it an object shadow, by the way. You can go object shadow, make it white, and you can also create a white highlight around it so that way it pops out. Or you can bring the blur down and then just, or bring the shadow blur down so it's small and then bring the vertical up, and then you can have a white outline at the top of it. Bring the intensity down. Now you have a white outline around it, so that way it will help to pop it out more. Just kind of a nice little pro tip there if you want to have your POIs pop out more. I'm not going to do that. I feel that the white underneath makes it pop out plenty, but you could totally do that if you wanted to. Have done that before. It's also been done in like a lot of old school RPG maps and video games and some other maps as well, so it's up to you if you want to add that kind of stuff. Next location, Tower of Sorrow, a lone, crumbling tower standing at the edge of the world, rumored to be the prison of an immortal being. Some kind of evil creature is trapped within this tower. And so if the tower was completely destroyed, that creature would escape. And that's kind of a little story element that we can throw in there. And maybe there's like a cult of people who follow this evil being, and their objective is to try to break the tower, completely destroy it so that the creature can escape. So we'll go ahead and we'll throw in tower again. There should be ruined towers. Oh, there's one right here. This one will work just fine. And we'll make it just a little bit bigger so that people can kind of see it. I'm going to change the luminosity. I want to change it to normal. I'm going to place it right here. And in fact, I think I'll take a rock stone and we'll put something underneath of it so that way it pops out, right? Because we don't want to build something on flimsy land, so might want to add, like, I don't know, a hill or something there. So I'll change that blend mode to luminosity so that way it kind of matches in there. I'm going to put it right here. Let's maybe change the brightness a little bit, bring the contrast down. I want it to match in the best that I can right here, and then just put that tower right on top of that. Let's select both. Make sure we're at the right layer. Make that one big. Go here, right on top. There we go. I got a nice little tower right on top of that hill. And then, of course, I can throw in some other, like maybe another little ruined part at the bottom. There we go. So I have a nice tower there. And maybe I want to show that there's like an evil creature that lives there. So it might not be a bad idea to maybe take a light source and put it on the tower so that it indicates that there's some evil creature there, right? It's not just any tower. So we'll go here, and then I'll put a light source at the top, and we'll make it maybe a purplish color, or you can make it green, whatever color you feel is going to make it kind of ominous and scary. And so I'll add just a little purple light right here at the top of the tower, and that will indicate that this is kind of an evil creature lives within that tower. Let's go ahead and connect these locations. There we go. Go ahead and I'm going to put it behind the tower. Remember, the overlap is super important. So now I have this nice overlap. Great. Now let's go to the next location. Let's see. What's this one right here? This is the Bellarn ruins. The remains of an ancient city or a capital or whatever you want. It's going to be kind of have a lot of ruins. It's now overgrown and abandoned. Stories persist of spectral, like guardians, or maybe some kind of spirits that kind of patrol the ruins. Maybe they're the spirits of the fallen residents that lived in this area, and maybe they're protecting some kind of treasure that lives there, a treasure that's kind of hidden there. We don't really know. This is kind of a simple one. We can just take a simple kind of ruin stamp and just kind of place it like right there. And of course, I might want to maybe add a little bit of stone, a little bit of that gray texture underneath of it, kind of a simple one, nothing complex. If you wanted to show that there were maybe spirits there, then you could add maybe a little bit of lights. Maybe I want to add some green kind of light, and I want to just maybe put a couple, copy and paste. In fact, what I'll do instead, let's do something else. Let's make them have like green swirling like spirits that kind of like are swirling around. So I'll change blue or the green color. I'm going to bring the opacity down. I'm going to change the blur radius. And I might even want to change the blend mode so that it kind of interacts with the environment better. So I'll place it over everything so I can kind of get a feel for it. And then I'll change that blend mode. I think lighten might work well. Let's go with lighten. and I'm going to bring the opacity way down. There we go. And then what I'll do is I'll just take my pen and I'll just kind of have little arches, little green swirls like this, kind of showing that there are spirits kind of traveling around in this area. There we go. So now I have a little bit of green light. And if you, of course, you could also just take a light source itself and just put it on the very top here, change the hue to green. And then what I can do is place it on top and then change the blend mode. What you could do is use color, and that will change the color of every stamp. Just make it nice and big and just bring the opacity down a little bit. And then I'll have this nice little green-like area right here that kind of looks like there's this kind of ruined-like area there. We'll connect it. Oopsie, wrong path. And as always, a lot of paths just kind of follow along the coastline. If there's a coastline next to it, use it. And that will connect it. I think the problem here is that the opacity is down. There we go. Okay. Just a couple more points of interest and we're almost done with that, and then we'll move on to the next parts. The Thawed Villages, a collection of once frozen settlements that have recently begun to thaw. So there's a little bit of a backstory there. Maybe there was a vicious deity that maybe had that made the village frozen to like maybe punish the inhabitants that lived there, and then maybe the curse wore off or new people were born and kind of recolonized that area, and then maybe that village started to thaw, and so it became a little bit more bustling. So what I want to do here maybe is have some of the village buildings be kind of like frozen, and then some of them be half frozen, and some of them be fully thawed. That way I can kind of show a transition between thawed and unthawed. That way it will kind of pop out there. So the villages here our villagers are returning. They report, but they do report like strange dreams. Like maybe the curse of that area lingers still. And so maybe there's spirits from the curse from the previous that died from the curse, and maybe they're haunting that area. Or maybe the curse involves the current residents having these nightmares or night terrors. Who knows, right? But it's always nice to kind of throw in that kind of little story bit stuff. So let's go ahead and choose a couple villages. I think a good one would be probably the Nordic villages, because it fits in with the region. So I'll go ahead and just show all names, and I'll kind of expand all the assets and kind of figure out what I want to add here. Let's see here. Let's just use this same one right here as I used up here. I think that's okay. But what I'll do is I'll flip it so it's facing in a different direction. I'll make sure that I turn all my blur off and turn my opacity back up. Make sure I get the scale correct. There we go. Let's go ahead and place one right here where it is the most thawed, right? You don't see a lot of snow. So that's a good one. There's our first one. Then I'll go in and throw in another one. Let's type in Nord, and there should be some buildings in here. So let's take these buildings right here. Excuse me. Let's have one right here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the contrast down, or the saturation down, just a little bit. And then I'll add in another one. Let's add in another like little village right here. But this time I'll bring the saturation down even more. So it's starting to lose color. And the further that I go in with these villages, the more and more the saturation seems to go down. So if I go finally another village over here, let's put a smaller one. Let's go with this one right here. Some small locations. Like let's see here. Let's go with this one right here. Put a little building right here, and then I'll bring the saturation down even more, and then bring the brightness up so that it kind of matches up. Same thing with this one. Bring the brightness up a little bit, and you'll see the transition. Let's boost the saturation up on this one so there's a very clear difference. So you can see that this region right here, much of the towns and stuff has been thawed out, but the further south that you go into this kind of frozen wasteland down here, the more and more the villages begin to lose a little bit of color. They get a little bit more frost-like in color. That way it can kind of tell that story. So then from there, we can go in and create the road that kind of connects these locations. You can have it kind of split off of here, One goes here. Let's maybe create a little road that kind of splits and connects these. And then this connects through here. And then this one connects to this one. And then what I'll do is I'll have the path kind of stop as it goes into the wasteland here, because it's a wasteland, right? Maybe there's strong winds that kind of make it to where there is no official path. Players just kind of have to find their way and navigate through this area without a road. Okay, where are we at for time? Woo! All right, let's add in that last location right here, Tabor Ruins. It's a vast complex of crumbling temples, weathered statues, buried in the snow. It is believed to have once been a stronghold of an empire long lost to time. Some claim it's a forgotten god still like closed, kind of cling to the frozen land. What I was thinking is that what I would have is like maybe have some statues in here of some kind, or I could add maybe like some fallen stones or something that could kind of make it pop out more. But what I want to do is create like a ruined complex. So I want the focus is a lot of ruins. So I'll create like a big ruin complex, like right here. I want to make sure that it kind of matches in. So I'll desaturate it, bring the brightness up. I'll bring the contrast down a little bit so it kind of fades in. So here's like the main complex right here. And then maybe I want to throw in maybe some of these other types of ruins right here. There are these small little ruins. Let's use these as well. Bump the sand, do the same effect. Let's add a little ruin here. Here. Let's stack a couple of them next to each other. Stack one here and here. And then, of course, I made some kind of equidistant from each other. So let's kind of create a little bit more distance between these. One overlapping here, one close to this one over here. There we go. So we have a nice complex of buildings here. Matter of fact, we'll have it kind of circle around it. I think that'd be a good idea. One here, one circling kind of around right here behind it, and then we'll have another one maybe right there. There we go. So now you have that nice complex of ruins right there. I think that overall that looks good. I'm not going to worry about creating a road that goes all the way to it. What I'll do is I'll have a road that kind of goes through the field here, and then once it starts getting to that frozen wasteland right there, the road becomes a little less apparent. Okay, at 139 changes, we're going to save. We've finished all the POIs, and we'll move on to that next part, which is adding in labels, frames, filters, and legend. Now, I'm not going to label every single thing, but I'm going to go over how to label each type of thing that exists. So you're going to label POIs differently than you label a geographical location. You're going to label a geographical location differently than you're going to label a certain ocean or sea or inlet, right? So there's different ways that you do labeling. And the way that I kind of do it is this. If you have a lot of locations on your map, and I mean ones that are jam-packed close to each other, then you might not want to consider labeling every single location, because what's going to happen is you're going to end up having thousands of labels, and that will kind of begin to hide and to distract from the landscape, right? And so what I'll end up doing is that you probably only have to label the most important locations on the map. So with some of the bigger POIs like these two sky bridges are really, really important. This Fey area is super important. Some of the larger cities and some of the larger kind of POIs are the ones that you want to label. Okay, and now there are many different ways that you can go about labeling a POI. You can use a banner of some kind, or you can just use straight text and put it on top. This is a design choice that you have to decide for yourself. Do you want to add banners, or do you want to have plain text? So what I will end up doing is I'm going to go to my notes and click each location, and just so that I can save time, I'm just going to copy and paste the title of the location right out of my notes, and then I can go to my text tool and then just type in, copy, paste the name of the location, okay? So now the next step is that when you decide to choose to label something, you should stick with continuity of font. Don't use 15 different fonts. Use one font, okay? Because that way it's not going to be confusing. Even when you're labeling different things like an ocean or a POI, make sure that the fonts remain the same. So you have to end up kind of picking the choice that you want. You can totally label whole regions. I generally end up doing that. I like to label entire regions, but I'm going to start with, well, actually, you know what? Let's do that, actually. Let's start with labeling the regions first. We'll start with big places first and then move our way down to the small ones. So let's start with labeling ocean space first. And the way that I do this is I should pick some kind of text choice. We could choose Cinzel. I think Cinzel looks nice. It's a pretty kind of font. It looks nice. We'll throw that in there. So we're going to label bodies of water, ocean first. The way that I go about doing this is normally what I want is I want the text to cover the majority of the body of water. This will give it a sense of feeling of like, okay, this entire area is the name of this body of water. So we can give it a name. We could call it, a lot of things in this region right here are called frost. So we could call it Frost Mar. Mar is just Spanish word for ocean. So I'll just do that. I'm not going to put any outline colors. And what I'll do is to make sure that this label doesn't pop out compared to the other labels like the POIs and the landscape, I'll bring the opacity down. And I want to make it nice and big. And I'm going to bring the opacity way down. This way, I labeled the area, but I made sure that that label doesn't pop out because some artistic rules like contrast. When I had the black outline and then it was set to 100% opacity, it kind of popped out because contrast is lightest light against the darkest dark. Because the ocean isn't really the most important location, other locations on the map are, I don't want to put all the emphasis on the ocean labels. I want to put more of the emphasis on the more important POIs. So I'm going to bring the opacity down for these ocean labels. So let's keep adding in more labels. Like we can put in another one right here. We can call it Albos C. The Albos C. I'll place it just right in here. I think that kind of fits right in there. Let's put another one right here. Let's call this the Sea of Monsters or Sea of Monsters. And then we'll probably put some creatures over there maybe. We'll see. And I will bring the scale down just a little bit so it kind of all fits in there. Let's put another one over here. We could just call this the East Sea or the East Ocean or East Mar, whatever you want. That way it's kind of nice and big and it kind of fits in the space. And then we can throw in this right here. Looks like a little bit of a little sea. So we'll call this the Middle Sea. The text is a little big. I might have to scale it down just a little bit so it kind of fits in there. And to show that it's a smaller sea, making the text a little bit smaller. There we go. And then this looks like there's a little bit of an ocean in here as well. A little bit of a sea inside of here. And so we'll call this the Salt Bowl. There we go. So this is the Salt Bowl. And we'll kind of just place it right in here. So this is kind of the way that I go about like labeling my seas, so that way they're not too popping out too much. And just kind of, and I also try to make sure that I have it set to this align center, so they're kind of signed up. So now we have those set up. We can go on to the next part is, how is it that I would label an entire region? And the way that I do my land region stuff is that I do things a little bit different. I'll start curving stuff. So what I'll do is I'll bring the opacity back up to 100%. So I'll go over here, bring the opacity up to 100%. I'll bring the scale down. And we can come up with a name for a region. Now, I probably won't label every single region just for time, but I just want to show you how I go about doing it. So let's say that I want to call this maybe the Verdant Plains. Okay, so then I would just go ahead and throw that down on top like this. And then to make sure that it kind of covers that space, I can go in my curve like this, and I'll kind of curve it a little bit, and then just kind of place it right here like this. And this will make it to where I'm following continuity, right? When it comes to labeling the ocean, I followed a very specific style. Big, low opacity, straight. But when I go to do the land, to like, if you want to label land formations, I'm going to go with a different style. I'll keep the same text, the same font, but I'll do a different kind of format. So I can add in something like this, these verdant plains here, and then I can go ahead and make sure that the opacity is down just a little bit so it's not taking away too much. but it's popping out a little bit. You could also throw in an outline if you want so that it pops out more, doesn't kind of blend in too much. And I'll kind of do that with all, let's say that I want to do more regions. Like I wanted to show that this is called the frying pan. Okay, so I can go in and type in frying pan. And then I can go over here and then I can kind of change the text. I can rotate it. I can move it around. If it doesn't pop out enough, don't forget to add that outline. Or if you want to add like a dark black shadow to it, bump the intensity and you can kind of get this nice shadow popping out. The trick is that you don't really want to hide too much of the map. So the reason why you might want to, if you don't, let's say that your map has nothing but little icons, right? And then there's not much large POIs that you can kind of look at. If your map is in that style, then maybe it's okay to kind of label your regions in this style. But if you feel that you have a lot of locations that can be easily covered, then don't label land masses and land things. That's up to you. So you have to decide for yourself. Just make sure that you create a standard, right? The ocean text should be the same. All the different, whether it's the font, the size, the opacity. When you do geographical features, same font, maybe change it up, have them be curved, make the text smaller, a little bit less opaque. And then you move on to the next piece. So you kind of get the idea about different types of labeling. So let's go ahead and talk about labeling POIs. How is it that I go about doing that? And normally it depends. If I have a lot of locations and they're going to overlap each other, then I probably will use just regular text and then less labels. But if I have a lot of room, I'll probably end up using like a banner of some sort. And so you can use these banners. And so what I end up doing is I'll put a banner next to a location, like the most important location. So if you like certain locations that are more important than others, that's fine. What I also want to do is I probably will maybe add an object shadow to this so that it pops out more. So object shadow, let's make it white. There we go. Let's bring the blur size down, bring the intensity up. And then when I place this down, there'll be a little bit of a blur here. And now that label will pop out. So we'll put a label here. Let's put another label here. I kind of like that city right there, so let's label that one. This is kind of an important area, like over here. Oh, the name of this city. Let's put one over this city. I like this area over here, so let's kind of put a location over here. I don't want to block too much, so let's put it down there. I like this location. Let's label that one. Let's put another one right here where the mushroom forest is, one right here. I don't want to like hide too much, so I'll kind of place it like right there. And that one's kind of close to the other label, so I'll move it up here. Try not to have your labels be like this close to each other. You want to create a little bit of distance from each other, just enough. Let me take a look here what other locations might be good. This one right here, I think, would be a good one. The Goblin Nation is a good one. Let me take a look around, see what other ones that I have. I haven't labeled anything down here, so let's maybe label this one. Let's label this one. Okay. You can place them underneath or on top. It's up to you. The other reason why underneath might look so well is because it looks like it's a mantle, right? The bottom mantle, like it's resting on top of it. So think of a banner as kind of like a foundation. It looks nice when there's a POI on top of the banner above it. But you can put them at the bottom or above. It's up to you. Either one looks good in my mind. It's up to you because the POI, if it's got like towers, then it looks like the towers are pointing up vertically at the banner. So it's really just a matter of aesthetics, whether you like that or not, whether you want it to have it like that. Up to you. I kind of vary, really. It just depends. Let's add in one more Let's add in one more right here underneath, right here. And then I can go in over to my first location, and then I can just select the note right here, Ivory Tower, copy, paste, and then add the text here. Let's add it in. And now this, oh, that's the wrong one. My mistake here. Did I call that the Ivory Tower? Let's double check here. For some reason, it didn't copy and paste. So I have my keyboard functions working. Let's find out. Okay, this one was Ivory Tower. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Select all of it. Copy. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Ivory Tower, perfect. Let's go ahead and turn the curve off. Remember, this is going to be different. I'm not going to add curves or too much curve. And also, if you're curious about what color your text should be on top of a banner, it's pretty obvious. A light color banner, dark color text. Dark color banner, light color text. It's not complex, right? You want to make sure that the players can see it. So it doesn't make much sense to make my text white. It makes more sense to make it black. So now that it kind of more easily pops up there, and I maybe want to bring the scale down a little bit. Ivory Tower, let's bring it down, bring it down. I think that's about as small as I can get it. Right there, Ivory Tower, and there's a little bit of curvature to it, so let's maybe just add just a little bit of curve like that. There we go. And let's also bold it because it is a bit small. So I should be able to make it bold as well. Bold, there we go. So it should nice and pop out nicely. There we go. Now I can copy and paste that, bring it over to here so I have the same font there. And I believe this one is called the Frost Sentinels, I believe. Frost Sentinels, yeah. Copy, paste. Oops, I don't think it copied it. There we go. Copy. Select it. Frost Sentinels. It seems a little big. So what we can do here is you just go to, there should be some longer variations of that banner right here. So you have a longer banner. So if your text starts getting too long, you can just go in and grab a smaller banner or a bigger banner to kind of cover it. And I'll remove the, oh, you know what? I'll flip it. This way it should follow in with the same thing. There we go. And then you can also stretch things too. So if you want, you can select it and then go to transform, then go to width, and then just bring the width a little bit so that way it pops out more. So Frost Sentinels, that one selected. And honestly, I kind of like banners quite a bit. I generally choose banners over text because I've noticed that a really busy map with text, the text gets lost with all the artifacts and stuff. And so a banner is a good way to isolate the text so that way it doesn't kind of discombobulate the eye because all that text kind of blends in with the POIs and the locations and all the art and stuff. So a banner is a way of isolating the text to make sure that it's very clear. I believe this one's called like a mushroom. Might be the Mushroom Kingdom, I believe it's called. We can just check with the font real quick. Check with the thing. Yeah, it's the Mushroom Kingdom. So we'll go ahead and throw in the next one. I'm going to call it Mush Kingdom instead of Mushroom. I think that's just kind of funnier. Or we can call it Mushdom. I think that's actually kind of funny. Mushdom. There we go. We have the Mushdom. There we go. Okay. Next one. Go into our thing here. What do we got? Oh, Fayholm. Great. Copy, paste. Throw in the text. Fayholm. Right on top, right there. Great. Okay, let's do this next one. I probably won't label all of them. I just want to do a couple of them. I'll probably label the rest of these off screen just to save on time. I don't want to spend the whole time doing it, but you guys get the general idea on how the labeling kind of works. Let's go ahead and add the next one, Nautilus City. Ooh, you know what? I'm going to have to make this a little bit wider, so I'll select this, go to transform, bring the width. There we go, and now it fits in there. Okay. So you guys get the general idea on labeling, right? And you can see the banners really kind of pop out. They curse and mush. The mush, darn it. You mushling fungi farts. All right, so I'm not going to label any more of the POIs. I think you get the general idea on how to do that. So I'll move on to the next thing. I'll just label off screen because I think you guys get the general idea. There's no need to drag you through all of that. So let's save it, and then we're going to do the next thing. Frames, filters, legends. We've got a lot to cover. We've been 2 hours now. Woo! We are going. This is one of those specials, right? So we'll go in and throw in the next thing. A frame. I showed you how to label the three different locations that you label. Ocean, water labeling, whether it's lake, rivers. And when it comes to rivers, you would create a text that bends around the river, just to let you know. So bodies of water is one. Then comes geographical locations, whether it's like a desert or a field or a marsh or a forest. You can label those. It's up to you. Just remember to have continuity in the labeling, right? If you're going to have this certain geographical region labeled this way, have the other geographical regions labeled the same way. Just remember that. And then finally, you can label POIs as well. I don't generally label villages unless it's like the starting village. I generally don't label little towns unless it's important to the story. I only generally add labels to the most important locations so that way I'm not bleeding all over the screen, bleeding all over the canvas, all this text that can be kind of confusing. I want to show off the landscape. So let's go with a frame. So there's multiple ways that you can go about going with a frame. They're just straight up frames that work as filters, right? So you have a couple here. There's like a dragon frame, one that you can use. Oopsie, I kind of used the wrong thing here. But you can use these frames. So you've got like a dragon frame, and the frame goes all the way around the edge there. If you like those frames, you can use those. There's another one right here. It's up to you. You can kind of choose. I feel like this is just the quickest way to add a frame. I kind of like that one. I think that looks kind of nice. It's not blocking any of the POIs as well. If I look around, I'm making sure that none of the POIs are being blocked. So I think that looks good. But you might have to do some moving around of the text, right? So like my Sea of Monsters seems to be hidden a little bit. So maybe I want to consider scaling it down and then moving the text over to here to make sure that it doesn't kind of go out. I want to put this here so it's a little bit more centered. This one here too. And I noticed that I had to double space, so I'll double space it. Same thing with here, Sea of Monsters. I'll double space it. Same thing with, this one's a little tight squeeze. So if I want to create Elbow Sea, I might want to maybe make it a little bit smaller. That way I gotta get the double spacing there. There we go. That's all on there. I think that looks good, looks good, looks good. I'm going to stick with that frame. I kind of like it. You can also make frames with the shape tool. That's up to you. Sometimes I like to have the frame not be connecting to the edge of the canvas. Let me give you an example of that. So maybe I want to select the shape tool. I'm going to select a stroke. You can pick whatever you want. You notice that there's frame here. You can make your own. So you can do this golden frame. And then I can turn on the grid right here. And then I can go in and maybe I want to create a frame that doesn't touch the edges. So I could go in like this and create a frame like this. Like that. And then I can change the scale up. Make sure that I have it above everything. So I want to make sure that it's set to layer 5. And then you'll notice that I have this nice frame that goes around it. I can also scale it up a little bit bigger if I want. Up to you. So it's up to you on how you want to go about doing that. I can bring the scale up a little bit, make it a little bit closer to the edge here if I want, like that. So now I have a nice frame that kind of goes around the edge there. So lots of different options that you can kind of go with. You got to decide what works best for you. I personally kind of like it where the frame doesn't actually touch the edge. This is just my personal preference. Everyone's different and likes different things. So you have to decide for yourself how exactly you want to go about doing that. So I'll leave that up to you. I'll bring that size back down. So you have that nice frame there. You can also, if you feel like there's a lot of negative space around the edges, you can add in things to frame more. For instance, you could throw in another filter. Let's delete this filter. We don't need it. Show filter. And then I can go ahead and choose a different one. So for instance, I could choose like this cloud landscape one right here. And you'll notice that it's going to go on top. Here, let me turn this on real quick so you can see it. It's just taking a moment to load. I can go ahead and take that and then take it down a layer. And then the frame will be on top of the clouds like that. And of course, you can always bring the opacity down on the clouds because maybe there's some text or POIs that are being blocked by the clouds. And that will fill in the negative space around those edges there. Because you notice there's a lot of negative ocean space. And so those clouds help to breach or to kind of frame the map. And also, I have another frame on top of that. So now I have these two layers of kind of framework that are taking place, kind of giving it a little more of a feel to it. If you feel that the ocean text is kind of in the way, then you can kind of just rotate it, bring it up here a little bit, move it over so that way it's not being hidden. So now that's all set and put together. The next step is we can stow and throw in filters. I think this overall frame looks nice. You can maybe add some decorations to the corners if you want. One thing that I like to do is maybe decorate corners. And there are these corner pieces right here that you can use. So I can take these corner pieces right here. Let's turn snap to grid off. And then I can just kind of line up these corner pieces like this. It seems to be off a little bit, so I can kind of bump the saturation a little bit, bump the contrast a little bit more, bring the brightness down, and then it kind of matches in more with the corner piece there. So then I can go in, add this corner piece here, take it down a layer so it's underneath. Actually, I will put it on top. That's fine. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and merge these all together when I'm done. So we'll copy, paste. Oop, a little slow to load here. Why aren't you working? There we go. Okay. Now I can select all of those, select all from here, then select that, create group, label frame, create. Kind of give it a moment to load. And then I can kind of go into that group and then make sure that those corner pieces are on top of the frame part. There we go. Okay. So the frames kind of get together. The labels are together. Now we can add in filters. So I did add in one filter already, the clouds. That filled in my negative space. I might want to even move this a little bit more this way. There we go. So a couple things that you can do. One thing is that I like to always do is I like to use a color adjustment filter. So I'll go down here to color adjustment filter. We'll let that load for a second. It's a little slow. And one of the couple things that I'll do is I'll kind of bump the saturation a little bit. So it will be, the colors really kind of pop a little bit. So I'll bring that up. And then I also like to bring the contrast up a little bit so that way the lightest lights and the darkest darks kind of pop out a little bit more. So if I kind of pump on or push up the contrast a little bit, it will start to cause the things to kind of get a little bit more, popping out the contrast a little more. You can kind of see that the contrast has gone up a little bit more. And of course, I like to bring the brightness up just a little bit, just in case the contrast made it a little bit too dark. So I've kind of added that, making it kind of darked out a little bit more. And then there are a couple other options that we can do here too. Let's say that you want to have it, there's some really cool filters in the parchment world style that I think you guys would find really awesome, really interesting. And that is these kind of folded paper filters. I've heard from a lot of people that, hey, where do I find these folded paper filters? And there's a couple of them that you can use. Like there's this white burnt one right here. And this one can be used to kind of create a white kind of outline around the edge. It kind of removes some of things around the edge there. You have to bring the opacity all the way up. And it kind of creates this burnt edges around it. If you end up not liking those burnt edges, you can change that blend mode. See how it's kind of dark around those edges? You can change the blend mode to lighten. Oopsie, not screen. Lighten. Or screen. It looks like lighten or screen, and it will remove that burnt edge. So you can kind of see now that I have this nice kind of like folded parchment paper kind of feel to it. But there's also another one called tattered, and it's the same one, only it has folded pieces of paper. So you could also use this one as well to kind of give it a folded paper look. But there's also some darker ones as well. There's a black one right here. And if you don't know which one to use, like should you use the burnt black torn edges or should you use the white one? And you know what? The trick is how bright is your map, right? If your map is a very bright map, maybe black would be a better color for their tattered edges, right? But if your map is really dark, like you see those lot of dark colors, then maybe it's best to use a lighter color for your frame, right? It's all about contrast, important tricks, right? I think either way, this is kind of a medium tone, like brightness. So white or black would work here, though I'm pretty privy to white myself because I kind of like it, and I feel that it really kind of causes it to pop out. But either one works just fine. You can decide for yourself how you want to do it. So we've added that filter, and since it already has like this shredded paper edges, it kind of makes sense to maybe add some old leather or old paper kind of feel to it to complement that, right? We've added that on there. So let's do that. Let's go over to textures. There's two textures that you can use for this. There's one called old paper. This one right here. We'll let that show up. Since we're not in the parchment world style, it's going to default to normal. So you have to go over to overlay. And you can kind of get this dark kind of feel to it. You can see kind of the dark edges. But when you do add this, it does get a little bit darker, but that's okay. You can go to your color adjustments and simply bring the brightness up a little bit more because you've caused these artifacts to kind of make it look a little bit darker. Or you can just bring the opacity down a little bit. Okay, so I kind of like the old paper look. It kind of adds a little bit more artifacts. It fits in with that tattered edge there. I think that overall looks good. The other things you can add is some color filters to it to add in some final continuity, because what we have here is we have a lot of colors on this map and they all kind of an explosion. And so adding in a color filter is a way of kind of making sure that all the colors kind of blend together. So you can add something like a cold warm filter. I just don't go up to 100%. I generally bring it down a little bit so that way it doesn't fully there. Let me turn it all the way off and you can kind of see what it looks like. So here it is with none of that cold warm, and then me bringing the cold warmth up a little bit. And you'll see that it kind of adds that purple kind of feel to it. You can add in like parchment, which is going to add a lot of like darker kind of red-like colors. Maybe you like that better. Maybe you like a more bluish overtone. So you kind of have this overtone of blue. Maybe you want to add in red to kind of give it a little bit more reddish kind of feel to it. You can do that, right? And so you can always kind of add in color filters to give it a little bit more continuity to it. So you can go through these various color filters to make that pop out. Okay, well, I think overall that's it. I mean, overall, you guys got the general idea. I did see a question in there from Eyes of Artemis about curving the text. You could totally do that, right? You don't have to do the same format that I did for the oceans. You could say, well, actually, I want my geographical locations to be straight text without any curve to it, and you want all your oceans to have curved text. That's fine. Do whichever one you want. Just make sure that there's a continuity in the text, right? If you're going to label an ocean like a certain sea a certain way, label all the other oceans the same way. So there's continuity in the text. That way that you have some, it's not confusing. Like, oh, wait a minute, this ocean is completely labeled in a different font and a different curve than the other ones, right? And it's okay if the curve is different, right? Sometimes you want to follow the curve of the land masses where the shoreline is, to follow the curve when you put your text down. You can totally do that. This is something that you have to decide for yourself. Just remember, make sure that you label all the bodies of water the same way. Obviously, lakes and rivers are going to be a little bit different, but that's up to you. You're going to have, the text is probably going to be a little bit smaller in a lake, and the text is obviously going to be curved along an ocean. So just kind of factor that stuff in there. But I think you get the overall idea on kind of how, when it comes to putting in with the labeling, right? And then when it comes to filters, it's all about just making sure that you pick filters that are going to complement what's already existing on the map, right? Like you're already happy with that there's a lot of color. Bump up the color a little bit with the saturation. You feel like, okay, well, the map needs to be a little bit more grittier, right? I want the map to feel like it's in a grim, dark like setting. So I want to add more old paper or leather kind of stains to it to kind of give it that old feel to it, right? So filters are all about just complementing what you already have and then adding to it. So it's not complex, pretty simple stuff. So what I'll end up doing is I'm going to save this, and then once I upload this to YouTube, you can go ahead, look in the video description, you'll find the link to this map and you'll be able to edit and use it for your own use, okay? All right, everybody. hey, that's it for this stream. If you wanted to do more lore building with this one, we could do like a stream on our Discord server and kind of flush out the lore. But I think you kind of get the overall idea on kind of how everything kind of comes together. The next series is going to be putting together a parchment world map. And that's just a totally different world when it is to making kind of a fantasy world. So I'm excited about that. The next masterclass, next Wednesday, we're going to be making weapons. And, you know, it's a lot of fun to come up with magical or mystical or enchanted weapons for your players to kind of use. I've always enjoyed that. All right. Thank you so much. Please stay safe and healthy and merry map making. I will see you all next week. Have a great weekend, okay? Bye, everyone.